So I just got back from firefighting duties down in Los Angeles. A couple teams from my area deployed down there as part of some strike teams and task forces to help out with however we could to the devastating Palisades and Eaton fire of Los Angeles County. My heart goes out to everyone who was affected by these fires. Being down there and seeing it all for myself brings it way close to home as someone who nearly lost a bunch of friends and family in the town of Paradise to the campfire many years ago. It was very reminiscent of that, and I'm very happy I was able to come down there and help in some small way. While I was deployed to these fires, I did not bring any of my drones with me, even though I believe I probably could have been a significant amount of help with them, at least in the areas where I was at, because of the thermal sensors being able to fly around, look for hotspots that we couldn't see from our engines and command vehicle that we were patrolling in. I feel like I would have been able to help out a little bit, but when it comes to something like this, you got to remember you are a small cog in the machine of the whole firefighting engine, and if you're needed doing something else, don't sit there and be raising your hand saying, well, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. There's times to show off your specialities, and there's times where you go there to do a job. That's why I left all of my drones at home. There was so much equipment out there to help with the spotting of hot spots and fires that I really wasn't needed. And that's totally okay with me. Because when it comes to firefighting, search and rescue, emergency response, I try really hard to believe in something called quiet professionalism. I'm a firm believer in the term quiet professionalism, which is why I'm not going to talk too much about what I did and saw down there. I think it's a very much needed aspect of our career field when it comes to emergency response, is to give off a good air of not making it all about yourself. It's not your emergency. It's someone else's. You're there to help. Come, help, go back to your life. While I was deployed to these fires, however, something happened that we really need to talk about, especially since this channel is mainly about drones. While I was down there, there was a drone strike on a Super Scooper airplane that was used for fire suppression on the fire line.
We're getting a look at pieces of the drone that struck one of two Super Scoopers dropping water on the Pallisades Fire this week. It damaged one of the wings of the firefighting aircraft. That plane, a crucial piece of firefighting equipment, now out of service until Monday at the earliest.
Investigators say this is the work of an unmanned, unauthorized drone that's now in pieces and part of a federal investigation.
One of the key ways that we fight fires is by calling in air tankers, helicopters, and small drop planes. The Super Scoopers were sent from Canada to help us out here, and while they were engaged in active fire suppression on the Palisades Fire, one of them flew into a drone, specifically a DJI Mini 3. So let's talk really quickly about why you should not be flying your drone on any sort of wildfire. Before we even start talking about what an incredible danger you are to all manned aircraft operating in the area, think about the fact of how distracting you will be to the ground crews. All of the firefighters that are out there on the ground, if they see a drone hovering over them, they're going to have that in the back of their mind the entire time they're doing their job, is that some yahoo is out there trying to get video of them to put onto their Instagram reel, put onto their TikTok, before it gets banned, and put onto their YouTube in order to show off and say, wow, look at this, isn't this so cool? You are endangering those people's lives because they are trying to do a job and you're distracting them. Now let's get into the real meat and potatoes of the discussion, which is what an incredible danger you are to all of the air assets. So the Super Scooper was hit by a Mini 3. Might be Mini 3 Pro, but it doesn't matter. It was hit by a Mini 3 drone. When you think drones, you might think of the search and rescue drones that I have on this channel, like the Mavic 3T or the Matrice 30T, which are fairly large style drones. The drone that did this damage to an airplane was one of the smallest drones on the market you can buy. It's very easy to get into, very easily portable. It's one of my favorite drones that I use for photography and videography before I upgraded to the Mini 4, which is pretty much the same size. This is how big the Mini 3 is. It folds out like so, and that's it. That's the size. I can land it and take it off from the palm of my hand. This tiny drone did this much damage to an airplane. You might be thinking, well, the drone's just made of plastic. It's going to fall apart if anything hits it. No, this drone right here is made of pretty hard plastic and has this in it. This is a metal core battery, lithium ion, which not only is this very dense and fairly heavy, it's flammable.
This demonstration shows what it looks like when a lithium-ion battery fails and sparks a fire, often because of faulty design or overcharging.
Have you ever heard of the term spicy pillow? That's the loving name we give to lithium-ion batteries that start to get damaged or degraded. They start puffing up like a pillow until eventually they catch on fire and can cause a deadly fire danger or hazard. If you hit something with one of these and that lithium-ion battery goes off, you've essentially hit them with a flaming armor-piercing round. And even if you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm only flying my drone a couple 100 feet off the ground, or even less than 100 feet off the ground, have you ever seen how low these firefighting aircraft have to come in order to hit their target? Not only to hit their target, to ensure that their payload maintains enough coherency to actually put out the fire and that they're not just sprinkling water or misting it. They need to fly low in order to make sure they hit their target and they're hitting it with as much water or retardant as they can before it disperses. So even if you're flying at around 100 feet or so, there's a good chance that firefighting aircraft is going to come in a couple dozen feet off the ground in order to hit their target. And your drone, if it's in the air, is going to be right in their flight path. These pilots are already flying in some of the worst conditions you possibly can. There's smoke, there's flame, there's panic, the radio's going crazy. They're stressed the hell out even if they don't admit it. And the last thing they need is a flying brick hovering in the air that they can't see until it's right on top of them. This right here, this little drone, you can't fly it much further than a couple 100 feet before it's practically invisible because of how small it is. Put yourself in the cockpit of these pilots. You're flying on this fire. You're trying to do active fire suppression. You're going along. You're thinking you're the only thing in the airspace, and suddenly there is a hovering brick in the airspace with you. These pilots are very lucky the drone only hit their wing and only punched a hole through it. Imagine if that had hit the windshield. You would be looking at a severely injured, if not dead, pilot. And then what do you think is going to happen to that helicopter or plane when all of a sudden they've had a huge strike on their windshield? It's punctured through, it's hit them in the helmet, it's hit them in the chest. They're wounded while trying to fly an aircraft through a firestorm. Have some common sense. And if you can't for some reason put yourself in the shoes of these pilots as they're flying, how many of you drive cars? Think about it. The next time you're driving down the interstate, the next time you're driving down the highway, imagine the next time you go under an overpass, someone hucks a brick off the side. How much damage do you think that brick is going to do to your windshield or your engine block? How much damage do you think it's going to do to you? That's what these pilots are dealing with these drones in the air when they're trying to do active fire suppression. They're dealing with a flying brick in their airspace. So you have your drone in the air, maybe you get lucky, you have a near miss with an aircraft, or you're just flying, you're not even near the aircraft, but they are starting to get close. If someone sees your drone in the air, you know what's going to happen? They're going to call off all of the air assets and ground them because of pilot safety, because no one wants to hit a drone in the air. If you are flying your drone on a wildfire, you are endangering not just the pilots, you're endangering all of the firefighters and emergency response personnel on the ground that are counting on those air attacks in order to keep them safe. You're endangering the property of all of the victims of these fires who are trying to flee and get to safety, and they are praying, they are crossing their fingers, they are crossing their toes, they are pleading in their worst moment of their entire life that their home is going to stand, and the only thing that's going to keep their home safe is air support. Someone sees your drone, they're not going to take that chance. They don't want to hit your drone, so they're going to ground. Think about that. If you are putting your drone in the air on a wildfire, you are actively working against all emergency responders and all of the victims. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Your drone footage is not more important than the lives and safety of others. So just, if you see a fire, don't put your drone up anywhere near it. Just don't. Regardless of whether it's a new start or whether it's a fire that's been going on for quite some time. Because if it is a wildfire that's been going on for a couple days, there's a very good chance they're going to put up something called a temporary flight restriction, or TFR. So let's talk about checking TFRs for a little bit. Say the fire's been going on for a couple days and you have resisted the urge to put your drone up in the air and get video of the active fire, but you still want to go get some footage for whatever reason. If a fire goes on for a certain amount of time, there's a very good chance that a TFR, or temporary flight restriction, will be put up. While I was on this fire, there were still reports of people flying in these TFRs. That's controlled restricted airspace. Think of it as flying over a military base. You wouldn't do that. And if you did, you're stupid or a spy. That's why it's always important, as part of your pre-flight checks, to check and see if there's any active TFRs in your area. Use an app like Autopilot or Air Control and get a good glimpse of what's going on in your area. See if there's any controlled airspace. See if there's any active restricted areas, or TFRs. It's always a good idea to check before you fly. Until recently, DJI had something called geofencing, which made it so you couldn't even fly or take off into those areas if you wanted to without the proper unlocking licenses. That's a topic for a different video, which I will be doing pretty much directly after this one. So anyways, so make sure, even before TFR is put up, make sure you're flying in good airspace. It's always just a good idea to do. So if all of these reasons of protecting people and property and not being a dick are not good enough reasons for you to not fly your drone on a wildfire, let's give you a couple other reasons. Let's talk about remote ID, which is a short-range broadcast from your drone that lets anyone know that your drone is in the air, and it broadcasts a lot of identifiable information. So if you're out there flying your drone, especially if it's a off-the-shelf DJI drone, just remember you're broadcasting a lot of information that the right people can pick out and figure out where you are, who you are, figure out exactly where you took off and landed from, which is a great way to get a knock on your window or door at a later time. You might be thinking, well, cool, remote ID, whatever. There's no way they can track it back to me. All DJI drones require you to create an account with them. So if you're flying the most common type of consumer drone or hobbyist drone out there, DJI, just remember before you put your drone up in the air and punch it through the hull of a Super Scooper airplane, that that drone has your email address on it, which is a pretty easy way to track you down. Just putting that out there. The fines for breaching controlled airspace are pretty high, and striking a aircraft is also a pretty steep fine. I think I read something along the lines of, I don't know, $75,000 is what I was seeing, and I believe I even saw something along the lines of you could face up to a year in jail. So just keep that in mind before you put your drone up in the air and start trying to video first responders working in a very chaotic zone. Leave it to the professionals, all right? I have a very sinking feeling that more incidents like this happening more and more frequently is going to really hamper, if not kill off, the hobbyist drone industry. Being able to put something up in the air that could endanger so many lives for a couple $100 or $1,000 or so bucks is something we're really going to have to start thinking about, especially if people can't behave properly with them. One of the things they teach you in the military is blanket punishments, which I always hated. But if one person in your squad screws up, there's a good chance your whole squad's going to be punished, and no one will love you for that, and there's a good chance you'll spend a lot more time on latrine duty. Some of the changes I could see happening, were I in charge of FAA safety and whatnot, is requiring it so that any drone that uses radio communication needs to have a Part 107 license or be registered with the FAA before it can fly. They're already really starting to crack down on DJI, and I could see stuff like this happening, where before you even take the drone off the ground, they want your name, social, email, phone, home address, all sorts of stuff before you can even put it in the air. Does that excite me? Do I want that to happen? Absolutely not. But stop crashing your drones into freaking airplanes and it won't have to happen now, will it? I could even see it so that if you want to fly RC drones at all, meaning they're controlled by radios, which allows them to have a lot longer range, you would have to have your Part 107 license, which is something that will keep a lot of people out of the whole industry because, yeah, it's relatively easy to get a Part 107 license. My dumbass got it, but it's still a huge barrier to entry that could keep a lot of people from getting into this amazing hobby and industry. just having that extra hurdle is something I could really see them putting in. I could really see them restricting it so that any radio-controlled drone you have to have your license for, you have to have all of the registration and everything for, and they would make it so that, sure, we're not going to completely kill off the hobbyist drone industry, but without all of these licenses and insurance and everything, you're restricted to Wi-Fi drones only. And Wi-Fi drones are something I really don't talk about because they have such short range and are so prone to having flyaway incidents that I haven't even touched them. You get a Wi-Fi drone about 100 or so feet away from you, there's a good chance it's going to go off and do whatever it wants. So it's nothing I'm happy about. It's just, as someone who plans for the worst case scenario, I could really see this happening because there's been a lot of airspace violations with drones recently, and this is a pretty big deal, especially on the heels of all of this DJI drone ban stuff that's being talked about. Having one of these go through an airplane wing is, it's not a good look. So obviously I know everyone who subscribes to this channel, which you should, is way too smart to go fly their drones on any sort of fire like this. My subscribers would never violate the law like this. And if you did or do stuff like this, then click unsubscribe. I don't need your ad revenue if you're going to crash into planes. But for everyone else out there who's maybe seeing this channel for the first time or is just interested in learning about how drone law works, or you're sitting there watching this video and you're thinking, wow, I see a lot of smoke coming from west of me. I'm going to fly my drone over there and take a look at it. How about you don't? How about we all just keep our drones on the ground when there's a fire, when there's an emergency, unless you're actively engaged in helping with the incident and everything's approved. How about we do that so that none of these worrisome ideas happen? We don't kill anyone. We don't get drones banned even further. How about we just don't? All right. When you fly a drone on fires, you're making it harder for first responders, for the victims, and making it a lot tougher for your fellow drone pilots. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.